Welcome to the What's Your Deal podcast, where we discuss business acquisitions, investments, management, and exit strategies. I'm your host, Matt Euler. Let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of What's Your Deal. I am so honored to have Robin Afinowich here with us today, and I'm going to share more about that as we dive into this. But let me start with the introduction, and then we'll get after it. Robin is a clinically trained mental health counselor who specializes in somatic and integrative approaches to whole person healing. Alongside her private therapy practice, she is also a national trainer and speaker focused on trauma-informed care, resilience, and workplace wellness. For more than 20 years, Robin has worked with a wide range of individuals from first responders to business executives, helping them perform at their highest level. Coming from a family rooted in business, she brings a unique perspective that bridges high-level performance with the inner psychology that drives it. Her work blends science and soul, pragmatism and intuition. At the core of it all, Robin's mission is to help people overcome adversity, build healthier habits, and find deeper meaning and purpose by connecting the inner and outer worlds. Robin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So part of how we met, I want to share with the audience, is that your dad, Jim Afinowich, is a legend in the M&A and business brokerage world, and a mentor to many. Yeah. Matter of fact, I don't know how many years I've been in the industry, coming up on 30, and he's probably 45 or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And then some.
Yes. And an amazing person. So when I was talking with him about some business things the other day, and I had brought up about trauma and some of the things that can show up in our deals, he had mentioned about you. And then we connected. Yeah. And during that conversation, there's so much there. And part of what's come from our conversation is that I'm sharing so much more about my background and how that's impacted my world and driven me or blessed me to be where I am, and the impact that has. Yes. And so part of why I'm so excited to have you here is because so many people, business people and otherwise, are focused on this is what they're after, right? This is the outcome. And what I've learned in some ways the hard way, and I've also been blessed to learn, is that there's just so much more to what actually makes us tick and why we think we're doing what we're doing, and is it worth it in the end, and did we get what we wanted, and all. I mean, it's just
layers,
all of that stuff. Yeah. And during our conversation, it inspired me. You inspired me to be more transparent with some of what drives me and some of my history. And literally, as early as today, we were recording an aspect of my history that anybody who listens to what I do, they're going to see a difference because it's a huge part of who I am. And it's I feel important now to talk more about it because, things happen to people, and we'll talk more about like what is trauma. Yeah. But it certainly had a huge impact on my life. So I'm excited you're here.
Good. Well, I'm glad. And I'm glad you could apply it already. It's hard. It's hard for the whole person to come out, and those vulnerable parts. We don't like to share our history. We like to keep it, compartmentalized and be performative and successful and operate from all the values of professionalism. And though that's necessary and effective in a lot of ways, the whole person doesn't show up. And I think we're in an era more than ever where we need people personally, in family and professional world, to show up more completely, more authentically. It gives more permission for the whole human experience versus just a part of ourself that's really good at one thing and the rest of the stuff has to be put on the back burner or forgotten or discredited in how we've gotten to where we are because of it.
Yeah, and I'm imagining in some of my own, overcompensating. Yes. For some other aspects that were there as well, and how that can not serve at some point. And
absolutely.
So for our audience, which is generally aspiring business owners and business owners, they may be saying, well, listen, where are we going with this? Yeah. And so I'd like to talk about what trauma means, how it actually shows up in people's lives. And again, just from a real practical standpoint, even if somebody thinks they didn't have some significant trauma or any trauma, what is it? How do you see it in your world and all the circles you travel? So can you start with that?
Well, I think Yes, that's a big question. So reel me in if you need to. But
Yeah.
I think to start, there is a big misconception about trauma and mental health. And I'll kind of touch on both of them separately, though they influence one another. Historically, I think folks think that trauma is something that happens to other people. It happens because of traumatic brain injury, a car accident, a sexual assault, war, veterans, it's some, major disaster of a life event, which it is all of those things. But what we neglect to consider is the effect that the subtle adversities have in our life, particularly during childhood development. And so when we start to look at people's performance in business or whatever scope of practice they're doing, and we want to really get to the root of what is motivating them, what are their obstacles, what are their fears, what are the things that are holding them back, what are the things that are motivating them, what we're really doing is we're taking a deep dive into the foundational building of their psyche, of their mind-body health. And we're asking what influences happened very early in life that built that, I call it like the wiring harness or the infrastructure of the brain that now are set in motion and tend to govern and kind of take over on autopilot as adults. And so trauma what always shocks people when they start kind of exploring their history of development or the context of their life, they start seeing trauma not as these events like, going to war or assault, but we look at lens through a big part of my work is looking at what's called adverse childhood experiences. There's 10 primary adverse childhood experiences that are considered to have a traumatic impact on an individual. And those things are, of course, your typical terrible abuses, but we're also looking at things like a kiddo who grows up in a family that doesn't have consistent food on the table. Hierarchy of needs is challenged. And we can talk later about how that really comes up in scarcity mindset, and fear and attachment to money and attachment to goals, right? We can look at a childhood adversity as being a child who grew up with an adult who used or abused substances, an adult who struggled with their own mental health. An adversity would be, complications in a divorce, So these things that are actually quite common amongst most people have the same kind of long-term effect as some of those more acute, scary, big T's or big traumas that people only categorize as being the primary trauma.
Okay.
So there's a lot of what we call compound or complex ways that adversity built on top of more adversity, built on more adversity, compounds and leads to challenges as an adult. And so there's this misunderstanding that trauma is just a certain thing, Similar to mental health. People think that mental health issues are somebody who's SMI, seriously mental ill, somebody that's got an extreme diagnosis, somebody that's schizoid affective. Mental health is just as important as our physical health.
Interesting.
And we don't look at it that way. In the same way that if I'm trying to be healthy in my body and I'm going to move and strengthen so that I'm flexible and strong, I'm going to put in good food, nourish my body. Our thoughts are the same way. We need them to be strong. We need them to be flexible. Our thoughts are either going to poison us and hurt us, or they're going to help us and grow us. So mental health isn't just about, psychosis at all. It's about the quality of our thinking, the emotions associated with that thinking, and how that translates to behavior.
Okay. And so for somebody who's thinking about trauma, like a huge trauma, right? Capital T.
Yeah.
A lot of us might minimize that, but I think the piece that I'm honing in on and learning more and more about all the time is just how the decisions I make are driven by whatever showed up in my life. And again, that's not about this today, but there's some trauma in my history.
Yes.
And so how often am I making a decision and that decision is based on that background as opposed to a clean slate? And that's why I'm so intrigued to talk with you here about this, is because I think it shows up way more than people realize. And so many of our activities or behaviors, I'm going to say responses, can be driven by something that's got nothing to do with current reality.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, one of the primary aspects, for building, resilience, good mental health is our capacity to engage in what's called metacognition. And that's your ability to watch your thoughts.
Oh, interesting.
What we learn about in yoga, what we learn about in mindfulness and meditation. And mindfulness is really cognitive behavioral therapy. It's just 5,000 years old, But the capacity to be able to think about your thinking is essential. And again, working with first responders, working with executives, everybody between, and though it is, the difference is when we're operating from trauma, most often it is a reaction. It is subconscious, it is impulse, it is survival oriented, it is rooted in conditioning. When we are responding, it's because I'm taking in input of what's going on. I'm filtering it accurately and appropriately to what is happening today versus when I'm reacting, I'm going into the hard drive of my brain. I'm gathering past experience, likely traumatizing, and I'm projecting that onto the current situation, which actually misinterprets the way I communicate, the way I'm reading people, the way things are happening, because trauma often comes from a point of reaction. So good mental health, good embodiment practices, the ability to be present means that we're activating more of our conscious brain, which means that I can slowly take in information, decipher it accurately according to today's lived experience versus my past lived experience, and then I can respond with the best tools, insight, problem solving that's necessary. Yeah. So the ability to watch one's thoughts. And there's a lot of people that don't understand that process. Why do I need to observe my thoughts? What do you mean I need to be mindful? Because in kind of this bird's eye view, allowing to watch your thoughts and get over them, you can see, there's an expression I use in the therapy practice a lot. Am I operating from old brain, trauma brain, or new brain? Because I know when I'm operating from old brain, it's going to be associated with high defense, lack of trust, issues of worthiness, which translate to overperformance, which we see a lot in executives, what we call fawning behavior. We'll talk about that in a little bit, right? I'm coming from all these past recalls of how do I make myself important and safe in this moment? And so though those motives are necessary and very important, they can also cloud our discretion. They can complicate our ability to connect to people, so it's the biggest part of the journey is just learning to be aware of your thinking and how it does affect your behavior.
And is the opposite of that just unconscious or not?
Technically,
not
yeah.
like
autopilot. It's just autopilot,
Yeah.
And it's scary to go out of autopilot because autopilot is necessary for survival. When we talk about trauma, I'm going to talk about it from the system of the body for a minute, because I think that this helps most people that have kind of an adverse effect or like resistance to mental health or trauma. They think it is about the mind, but it's really about the system of the body. So when an individual experiences compound stress, a lot of stress, adversity from childhood or experiences as an adult, threat or the perception of threat, we have a biological and evolutionary design in our physiological composition that allows us to fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. It's a basic survival necessary. And what happens in true trauma is we get stuck in that, right? Most of us interchange, there's certain situations where I'm a fighter, strong sense of justice, certain situations where I'm a flighter. If I get too close to people, I'm kind of out the door. I freeze when issues of worthiness come up. So I have, through self-reflection, through metacognition, through understanding my motives and my behaviors, I understand what stressors elicit a certain or particular stress response in me, which then gives me the toolkit to be able to adapt my inner world to be able to kind of clarify and untangle that so that I can be more present in the outer world. So we've got our fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. I'm going to break this down as quickly as I can and interrupt me at any point. And they're the four F's of leadership, or the four F's of survival. So in professional world or leadership, when we've got somebody that has a stress response, we can interchange trauma response and stress response, because too much stress does the same exact thing that trauma does.
Interesting.
Which is also really, really important for people to know. You don't have to have any adversity. You can just be working 70 hours a week and burning yourself out for 45 years. Your imaging of your brain is going to look the same as somebody with TBI. Stress is stress at the end of it. So if it helps people take away the word trauma and integrate the word stress, then do that. So stress response, fighters, what we see in leadership is, strong sense of control, micromanaging, oppositional, defiant, defensive, power and control cycle, leadership that's just fighting, digging their heels in, my way or the highway, very black and white thinking. Flighters are those leaders that tend to have a hard time with follow through. They get to a point, an apex in the business, in their project they're working at. Right before completion, they get high levels of anxiety. They panic, they freak out, and they run away. Right, all natural. A little bit avoidant. Flighters have a hard time connecting with people because of that. Freezers shows up in leadership as completely conflict avoidant. They deflect conflict to other team members, which can then become a disproportionate distribution of responsibility, which creates all sorts of terrible team dynamics. Freezers are the classic paralysis by analysis.
Oh, interesting.
The overthinker, like I don't know, so I'm just going to think about it more, but nothing gets done. And then the fawners, which is probably what I see across the board as being the most consistent in leadership and business, because fawners are master overachievers. They're high performers. They're high thriving, high functioning in their stress response or their trauma response. They don't say no to anything. It becomes harmful because some of the thoughts, some of the mental health around that response is the inner dialogue that is catastrophic for long-term health. This is unreasonable standards of perfectionism, extremely high standards of professionalism, just high standards in general. There's so much internalized pressure to perform, to be perfect, to be on all the time, that eventually that becomes, pretty unsustainable. For a while, it's
I'm glad
very.
I don't have that.
I know, me either, right? And it's hard because it is rewarded. It's rewarded because we get feedback from the world that says, "Yay, we need more of this." Our culture is driven off of concepts that say, "Be perfect," which is the discussion we're having today. But behind the scenes, none of us are perfect, and we need to normalize that.
Yeah. Well, so somebody who's listening, it's like, you know what, I don't want to dig back into my history. I don't.
Yes.
So A, do they need to? And B, why? Like, what's the benefit of, and I feel like I know it because I'm on this path, but what's the benefit in trying to become more conscious and more present?
And that's to each their own. I work in private practice, and when I do like executive coaching, I work with both. I work with people that are like, and I'm one of those, I have a lot of adversity in my own childhood, and I don't remember a lot of it, and I don't want to know because what I do remember isn't the best, But there are some people that need and find great value in that. That kind of excavating of the past. Okay. Some people don't need to. What's amazing about healing is we heal now. We don't heal in the past. So those folks that don't want to dig stuff up, they don't have to. So there's a lot of creative ways in good therapeutic care and in good metacognition practices where you can heal today without having to revisit the wounds of yesterday. And so one of my primary assessments is, okay, what is your primary stress response? And I don't need to know why. I don't need to know the details of an individual. I work with a lot of people that don't want to talk about the details of the past, or they're not retrievable. They're not accessible. So no, I don't think people have to get into the past, but I think it's important that if people want to meet their potential and really their lifelong health, because it's not just about the performance and work, but when we do not manage our mental health, when we do not notice how stress is affecting our body, when we suppress those things or those practices, that's when we get sick, right? Suppressed
being don't feel well cough or sick from cancer. All
of the above. It's toxic. Okay. The root of all disease is inflammation. Your biggest culprit for creating inflammation in the body is too much adrenaline and cortisol, which is what we're addicted to it culturally, And so some people get chronic colds. And to me, as I'm a body-based psychotherapist, so when my folks are high performing and they're getting sick and they're getting the flu and they're getting rashes, to me, I'm like, that's the first indication you're not managing stress. Your body is speaking. Your mind might be keeping it together. You might be performing in your numbers. Your team might be doing great, but internally, your body is communicating to you and it's saying, I'm breaking down. I'm having a really hard time. And so we need to listen to that call, that biological call of the body that's saying, even though you think this isn't affecting you, pushing it down, it is affecting on a cellular level, on a mitochondria level, on an energetic level, if you want to get into that world, I lost track. You have to remind where are we going?
Well, I guess at the end of the day, it's why do it, right? And I can share from personal experience. I'm one of the people that's not opposed to digging into the past because I don't want to carry it.
Yeah.
And when I'm not present and in joy, I'm usually coming from something else, which means I'm reacting because of some concern or whatever. Yes. And so because I've been self-reflective for a long time, I feel like I can notice the difference. I can't always get myself out of it, but I want to be here. And that's where I bring the greatest value to my family and to my kids and everybody. Yeah. And when I'm not, I'm really miserable. Yeah. So if somebody out there is trying to decide, listen, I don't want to do any of this, I can just tell you I think you'd agree, but it's so much more joyful to be here.
Yes.
As opposed to operating from there.
Yes.
Whatever that there is.
Absolutely. And, it often happens organically where when people, like a lot of times when I work with folks that don't want to unpack, we do mind-body practices that are anchored in, holistic health. So I look at everything from, prescriptive yoga postures, meditation, breathing, nutrition. I do equine therapy. I do gardening therapy. I do all these other, holistic practices that are not the conventional. I'm a talk therapist. I'm trained in talk therapy, but we know that too much talk therapy around trauma reinforces the conditioning, right? Okay. And so all these other holistic approaches give people the capacity to be in their body presently with equanimity, with peace, with ease. And usually when they start feeling like you're talking about that ability to be more present, to be safer in presence, to be more alive in presence, to be able to engage with family, clients in presence, naturally they become a little bit more curious about the things that have kept them from that. Or what we see sometimes happen in really big, powerful trauma work is the stuff that's been forgotten starts to surface, and then that is where we do a little bit more of that intense trauma work. Okay. Because when the mind starts to surface things, that is the subconscious's way of saying, I'm ready to integrate, I'm ready to heal, I'm ready to look at this. Sometimes we forget things because we're not ready to look at it. So when your dedication of being present, looking at your own past, that means that you're ready to look at it. Some people aren't ready. And so we have to create all these other experiences to prep them, to get them ready if ever they choose to get ready. But I love the way you said it. I don't want to carry this around. I don't want to carry this backpack around. It is a weight, and whether you know the details or not, even having a general idea, concept of what the common themes of your past are that could be contributing to your dissatisfaction of life now. That's enough. It doesn't have to be the deep down nitty-gritty details, but just common themes,
Well, and the dissatisfaction with life, I think that's a piece that I think we see more of all the time now, and whether that's so much social media or so many devices and screens and all of these things, we could speculate, I guess, but I think there's a whole lot of, medication needed to try to keep people able to get through a day. Yeah. And I just can't help but wonder how much of that has to do with what we're hauling around and maybe not necessary if we were willing to stop hauling it around. And so you had mentioned about managing stress. Yes. So we've all got lots of stress or I should say most of us have plenty. So managing that, what does that look like?
Well, and to your point, we do have a lot of stress. And again, I think that's part of this conversation is to normalize it. I always say I've been inside people's brains for 25 years. I've helped a lot of individuals, a lot of agencies, a lot of people. And, the common denominator that really bonds people isn't always just the good things. It's not the high stakes business moments, but it is the recognition of that, the humanness of our suffering, and not to, but people are, you would be surprised at how many people. I mean, it's my world. I live in the trauma world. I've seen the dark underbelly of the world for my entire adult career and other parts of my life as well. But it's everywhere, and it looks different for everybody, and everybody has a different internal response. So normalizing that, stress is out there, trauma is out there, and it's affecting all of us. And we live in a world where, we're just starting to break the surface of like talking about it, breaking the stigma, and introducing stress management techniques that are actually effective, because historically our stress management techniques, if it's not done with professional help, we're a culture that very easily numbs out, whether that's with media, shopping, gambling, substances, all the ways that we numb out to self-medicate, right? Sometimes we go into traditional counseling, and, I don't want to discredit traditional counselors out there, but I am a holistic practitioner, so I believe we need, again, a whole body approach. We need to really look at what we call in the trauma world a bottom-up approach. It's not just about thoughts and how that affects, but how your body's trauma response affects things. Stress management, we are so used to thinking that stress management can come in a pill. It can come in a weekend retreat. It can come in something we buy, something we identify with, external. And I don't think that's a coincidence. And I won't get into my, capitalistic soapbox, because we love capitalism in America. But what is missing, I think, in stress management is the inner world, right? Really being under, and the discipline where stress management isn't just something we do at the bookends of our day. I'm going to go work out an hour in the beginning of the day, and I'm going to work out an hour in the evening. And that's going to minimize and set the balance for, meanwhile, the 10 or 14 hours where I'm operating at Mach 10, 150 miles an hour. I'm battling my old brain, my new brain. I'm battling internal, all the intensity that goes on during the workday. I think I was telling you this in our first conversation, but we know now that the new smoking is sedentary behavior. So they say that if you sit for longer than 45 minutes, 48 minutes, I think it is, without intervals of movement or interruption throughout the day, that's equivalent to smoking a pack of cigarettes a day.
Wow.
Right? So when we think of stress management, it's not something we do in these margins at the beginning or the end of the day. It's something that we need to filter.
It's a lifestyle.
It's a lifestyle all day long.
Wow.
All day long.
Yeah.
Like after this, we should all get up and go for a walk outside and get some fresh air, have a snack, have some water, do some deep breathing. It needs to be, I say, sprinkled in all day long. Self-care, stress management should be free, and it should be available 24/7. And if you've got a breath, a body, and a mind, you can do it. You have everything that you need.
So from a stress standpoint, I know I put lots of stress on myself. Just I got this new business I want to buy, or I want to do this, or I want to do that, or I say yes to something, or whatever. It creates stress. Yeah. And so how do we manage that? I mean, a lot of us are introducing that stress on ourselves. Yeah. And it's not helping us. Yeah. And so what are some of the tools? Is it learning to say no more? Is it learning to figure out why we say yes? Is it like, what do you see with the people you're working with where the stress continues to show up and be unmanaged in a way that is detrimental for people getting what they want? Yeah, absolutely.
First, I do want to say that there is healthy stress, that takes us to the edge. It makes us high performing. It challenges us. Some really wildly successful professionals are great at that like final minute of procrastination, like just getting everything done under the pressure, and they perform infinitely better. It's just a composition thing. It's just the way that their brain is. So there is a lot of stress that is motivating, that is healthy. So I think what's really, really important, and this goes back to metacognition, self-awareness, understanding your inner world, understanding what is my motive for doing this? Is this motive of being Am I stressing myself out because it's really necessary today? Or am I stressing myself out because I'm feeling deep insecurity and lack of worthiness that is related to a parent who abandoned me or whatever it is? And now I'm compensating by putting pressure on myself to do more. And so being able to understand your motives. No, I'm taking on this project because it's inspiring. I'm engaged. I love these people. I have new ideas. This is going to, expand my wingspan in my business. I'm taking it on because it's growing me. If we take on stress because it's perpetuating these old beliefs of ourselves, then it becomes toxic. Then it becomes problematic. And then it becomes something that really we become addicted to. I mean, most of us are kind of, an addiction is a strong word, but it's an inability to interrupt an automatic propensity or habit towards a thing or a behavior. We are addicted to our thinking, and we are addicted to our stress. And again, what's really hard culturally is if we're high performing, we're stressed, we're about to burn out, but the whole outer world is like, good job, more.
Yeah.
When you get that external validation, it's really hard to shut it off, And so you've got to be honest with yourself and understand what your threshold of stress tolerance is, and to understand when your stress is becoming unmanaged. I mentioned earlier, for me, I know that there's some very basic day-to-day functions where I know I'm not managing my stress. Let's say I'm doing a lot of content development or case notes, and I'm really heady, and I am a perfectionist. I have an inner critic. I'm high achieving. I'm that fawning person. I have unreasonable standards for myself. So if that voice is running in the backdrop of my mind and I'm writing something and it's starting to create this geyser overload of adrenaline, and I'm just really intense in it, I'll notice my posture starts to change. I'll be typing and I'll have to delete and write again, and then delete and write again. I'm not online. My executive functioning is compromised when I'm stuck in a state of stress. So when my thinking becomes really cloudy, I know that that's an indication that I'm probably retrieving things from the hard drive of the past. When I'm moody, and I'm one of those people that gets hangry, which is why I offered everybody a snack when I came in here, right? We have to have food on our hand all the time. And by the way, a handful of cashews is equal to half of a Prozac. So
wow.
Nutrition is powerful, right?
Yes.
But yeah, get cashews. I did a bunch of trainings for the school system on trauma-informed care. And when I mentioned that, the superintendent came in and he bought all those Costco-sized things of cashews and put them in all the teacher break rooms. And I was like, that's awesome. I digress. Being able to understand your signals for when you're grumpy with your wife or your kids and it doesn't make sense. For me, my body does speak. I have a lot of autoimmune issues, inflammatory stuff, not a coincidence given my history. I'm a cancer survivor, not a coincidence given my history. I get migraines. I don't sleep. So it's really listening to your body and also watching what are the motivating factors behind what you're doing, because that's going to be your barometer.
And it will tell you.
It will.
Yeah, if you're listening.
Absolutely. And we're not encouraged to listen. And so I think that's why it is, again, important to have this discussion. Your body will speak. Your intuition will speak. Your emotions will speak. We think emotions are terrible, bad things that are not allowed in the business world. We have to be strategic and logical. Emotions, when managed through good mental health, are a wonderful barometer of being able to assess lived experience and cultivate it in a way where it becomes wise, it becomes resourceful, it becomes insightful. And a lot of business folks rely on, particularly over long periods of time, it's something that you develop with the expertise of your field, but a gut feeling. It's not I've got logic about this.
Yeah.
No, it's a gut feeling, And so we have to understand how our feelings, when they get they're little entities. I think of feelings as like little kids when they get grumpy and fussy and meh. That's an indication that, I might
somebody
be
speaking.
Something needs attention here. What is it?
Well, I know when I've been at periods of my life when I've pushed enormously, my production goes down. I become less effective.
Yeah.
And wherever that fits, I don't know. But I can tell you that the more I've been willing to be present and operate from the present as opposed to the past, I'm getting more done. I'm enjoying the process more. Life is great. I sleep better. I mean, all of those pieces.
Yeah.
And there are times that I still slip into a compensating behavior.
Yeah.
And it's just worth looking at.
Totally. And we're not perfect. You know, it's not about, the work isn't about being, perfect. It's about improving our connection to ourselves first and foremost, and how improving our relationship with ourselves inevitably is going to filter out with our relation to the entire world, know. And awareness, again, it's the first option or the first point of change. Just noticing, oh, isn't that interesting? I'm slipping into old behaviors. That's huge. Just the ability to do that means that healing is in motion, that change is in motion.
So if somebody's listening to this conversation and maybe not, resisting this idea, what's the first step? If they crack the door open and they're like, you know what, I'd love to have more joy in my life, at some point, or I don't want to be on edge and, barking at people all day long and screaming at my employees or whatever the behavior might be. What's the first step without it just being not worth doing? Stick with what they got.
I mean, I think, anytime we approach new ideas, new concepts, certainly self-reflection or new behavior, I love the expression, just look with interest and curiosity. You don't have to commit to anything. You don't have to do a deep dive. You don't have to put yourself in therapy 5 days a week. Just start looking at yourself, at your life with interest and curiosity. Some people are growth oriented. Some people are not. Some people are really comfortable in the life that they've created, and if they've been successful, it's likely a pretty privileged life. So, with privilege, we don't have to change and grow. That's part of the privilege, But I would kind of go back and highlight something that you said in your industry that you noticed about yourself, which was, I've seen myself when I push, I'm less effective. And I think that is so important for people to realize that, because they think that pushing is always going to guarantee in being more effective. And take emotions aside, take intuition aside. When we look at the science of the brain, this is facts, folks. This is science of the brain. When we have high levels of stress, we are stuck in our lizard brain. We don't have access to I'm going to be nerdy here for a minute, our hippocampus where we retrieve information. We don't have the ability to connect to people. And what we talk about in the clinical world is we're offline. We are not operating in our ideal executive functioning. Our problem solving is challenged. Our critical thinking is challenged. Our creativity is challenged. Creativity is necessary for any business when you want to be progressive and have new ideas. And when we are resisting the natural flow state of where life is happening in today, we're getting lodged in that lower part of the brain. And so coercion, which is what we're doing when we force, coercion I can't look at a plant and be like, grow, right? It doesn't happen. And in fact, it's never going to happen because it's a constriction of that energy, So first is recognizing, what I'm doing might appear to be working, but is it? So again, being honest with yourself. Secondly, be willing to just look with interest and curiosity and to start slow. Sometimes when I'm working with folks, it will literally be, I'm a big advocate of giving homework both for my counseling clients and my coaching clients, but my challenge will be, I work with a lot of women in leadership, and my challenge is, instead of your third Starbucks, I would really love it if you could just try to drink, 2 more Stanleys of water a day. And that's it. That's their stress management, right? And it doesn't seem like it's enough, but it's slowly giving pieces, of tools. And they're recognizing through self-awareness, wow, I'm thirsty. One thing we see from professionals all the time is they don't go to the bathroom, right? Listen when you have to go to the bathroom, right? Drink the extra 2 cups of water and then go to the bathroom. Listen to your body. So it's just about, for those that are hesitant, just do small things. Why water? We know that hydration helps with brain fog. We know that it flushes the toxins, the adrenaline and norepinephrine and the cortisol that keep us stuck in that lower part of the brain. Some of the best stress management techniques are what I call biological basics. And this is where I start people who are resistant to some of the bigger work. You've got to eat. How are you eating? What are you putting in your body? You've got to move. How are you moving? Where are you moving? How often are you moving? You've got to breathe. I teach people how to diaphragmatically breathe all the time. Breathe through the belly. It allows you to be present. And you've got to think. How are you thinking? You've got to sleep. How are you sleeping? You've got to drink water or drink something. What are you drinking? So stress management, for those that are apprehensive and don't have the commitment, it's about pairing practices of new awareness with the things that you are already doing. Because I know people that work 70 hours a week tell me all the time, I don't have time to go to yoga. I don't have time to go to Orange Theory. I don't have time to go to therapy. Okay, well, let's find ways that you can still do what you're doing, but slowly inlay self-reflective, self-awareness practices. And 99.9% of the time, that naturally leads people down a bigger path of healing.
Well, and I would even say success.
Yeah.
Right, because at the end of the day, we've all got a certain amount of time, and if you're on that treadmill and you get sick, well, how much time then do you have to work
Absolutely.
out? And it really comes down to that.
Yeah.
At some point.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, it just boils down to such a large extent is just, do we want more joy in our life or not? And it's not about business. It's not about how many or what. It's about are you feeling present, or at least for me. Let me say it this way.
Yeah.
It's about, am I happy in what I'm doing? Yeah. Am I enjoying my life?
Yeah.
Am I showing up with the way I want to? Or am I reacting? Yeah. And when I'm reacting, I'm off. Yeah. And when I'm doing the former, I'm where I want to be.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean life's perfect, and it doesn't mean that there'll never be issues, but it is a much happier place to be, which would be the motivating factor for anybody who's listening. Look in the mirror for a minute.
Yeah.
And just do you have joy?
Absolutely.
And if not, then maybe it's worth taking a look at this and seeing if there's something that can adjust to bring long-term health and joy. Yeah.
Well, and long-term health, and mental health, physical health, and I see mind, body health as the same thing. I don't separate them. I mean, our mind affects our body affects our mind. But what I see that's very, very common, and I've seen this with a lot of brokers and business people, lots of people in leadership, is the kind of high intensity forging through the career, getting all the things, and then retirement comes. And burnt out has had, people start now, they're slowing down. So now their body's really speaking. They get sick. They're burnt out. They're tired. They pay attention to their relationships that they've neglected the last 30, 40 years. People are not present in their life. They've left an industry, a job, a business, a number of businesses that they built identity around. Now they're having an identity crisis because they're like, who am I? My body's hurting. I'm exhausted. I have all this success, but I don't have access to joy. I don't know how to find it in me because I've been back-burnering it my whole career to put too much emphasis on other kind of value and production, And so if you want joy at the end of the life, if you want health in retirement, if you want, more time with your family, the ability to be present later, you've got to start it now.
It starts now.
Because what I see more often than not is when people get to later, they are broken down. And so, and that's very discouraging because they look back and they're like, wow, I shoulda, woulda, coulda. I wish I would have woven joy and presence and contemplation into my life a lot sooner.
Well, regret is something I try to avoid whenever I can.
Yes.
I don't like regret.
No.
And the other piece of it is, especially in this for this topic with our audience, where it's success driven and what are we doing? At some point, it's just, when's enough, and what are you doing it for?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think this ties into all of that.
Yeah.
So,
well, and I think really quickly, about when you're healthy in your personal life, when you're healthy in general, it allows you to show up more authentically, more fully wherever you're at. And for those for those folks who are in leadership roles or mentorship roles, I think, or have been in the field for a long period of time, and this is me being kind of idealistic, but I do think and I'm not going to dare put myself in the category of elder, but as people who are well seasoned, I do feel like we have a responsibility to kind of shape shift a lot of the work cultures by demonstrating how it is possible to be highly successful, healthy, and joyful. I think that we need to, be the trailblazers that help kind of pave the way to change industry so that this isn't an epidemic and so that it isn't a weird thing to talk about on a podcast, Yeah, I mean, it's, we have a lot of responsibility, I think, when we start really examining the potential of human evolution, which is a really kind of fancy way of saying it. But, we do lead by example, and people, are going to learn from you, and they're going to be inspired by your story and your transparency and your vulnerability and your ability to overcome adversity with great success, to show up for your family in ways, to show up, in your projects in certain ways. That's going to inspire people.
Well, I hope it does. And it certainly makes it a whole lot more joyful for me.
Yeah.
And I've got, from a leadership standpoint, I've got an obligation, or what I would consider a duty to my children to demonstrate the right way to do it, because they are paying attention.
Yeah.
And not that I've always done that.
Yeah.
And I work at it every day.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Kids are the greatest teachers. They are what I call the relationships in general, our spouses, our kids, the biggest practicing field. That's where it matters the most.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you for going down this road with us today.
Absolutely.
I know it's a conversation that might make some uncomfortable.
Yes.
And to me, it's a worthy conversation.
Yeah.
When I look at I'll call it mental health, even though that's a strong term.
Yeah.
My mental health, or my frame of mind now compared to 10 years ago, night and day difference.
Yeah.
Wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah.
Much happier to be willing to look in the mirror and self-reflective than trying to shovel more in that backpack and keep crawling along.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not sustainable.
No.
And it's not fair to yourself,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is there somebody in your life, can you share a quick story about somebody who's given you a hand up in your life when you needed it?
Well, definitely, I would say my dad. First, I would say, my kids, always a support. They were kind of latchkey in the cultivation of my education and all my careers. I single parented for a lot of time, so they tolerated my messiness as a parent, my growing, evolving, healing, and then my commitment to the work, so they're really one of the biggest motives for helping people, and leading by example. But I would say my dad, my dad is, a very revered, respected, business guy. He's a wonderful, wonderful father, but really has shown me and I'm fourth generation entrepreneur, everything from a farmer to a vet to a printmaker to mergers and acquisitions to this, trauma forward, what I'm doing. But and I asked him, I was like, I might share a story. It's a little vulnerable, but it's interesting. And this is going to sound like a therapist for those of you out there that are cringing, bear with me. But one of my biggest memories of childhood turns out to be one of his biggest memories in his life. And it was, my dad has had a million businesses, a million ideas. You know him. He's just so creative, so ingenious, risk-taking, revolutionary, like all the things that are wonderful and make people wildly uncomfortable, and took a lot of risks, some which have been very rewarding, others in relation to this memory, maybe not so much. But I remember being just a wee one, maybe 3 or 4, and he had this really awesome, I wish he still had it, yellow Volkswagen Bug. And he and my mom had, they had a newspaper business. They had a business in Chile. They were doing all sorts of cool things, and they went bankrupt for lots of reasons. And they, lost everything, lost their community, lost everything, and including the marriage. And so I remember that day, and I was just talking to my dad about this the other day. He's like, I realized one of my big trauma moments was when I drove away in my yellow Volkswagen Bug. And I was like, I remember that day. That's one of my, And so we kind of joked about it. And it was also really, interesting. But I remember Dad driving away. He had this Volkswagen Bug just piled on top with everything. And, being a kid, I didn't understand it all. And now getting to know his story and his relationship with business, obviously I understand it from a lens. We have a very, very close relationship, but he has been the inspiration for, bad stuff happens. Your life can be turned upside down, inside out, and you can follow your passion, follow your truth, follow your vision, keep going, work hard, find a balance between being strategic and a linear thinker and being intuitive and an emotional thinker. High emotional IQ is totally underrated in this world. And so he's been such an impetus of motivation because he blends both worlds beautifully, and he has since, built an empire of mentorship and wisdom in his industry. And so he's just the classic example of a resilient business person. And he continues to show up more and more presently every day.
And that's great.
He continues to grow every day. He's always learning, and he's just the biggest inspiration.
Yes. Well, that is great. And knowing him, I certainly appreciate that so much. So how can people find you if they would like to dive into this a little deeper?
I have two websites. Trauma-forward.com is for speaking. I do a lot of speaking and training, consulting, more executive coaching there. And then counseling, the holistic practices, the yoga, equine therapy, nature stuff is robinafinowich.com. And email is always great for me, robinafinowich@gmail.com. I'm not great with the social medias because it's kind of a weird world, but both websites have contact form or just email.
That is so great. Well, thank you for being here.
Thank
we
you.
really appreciate
and thanks
it.
for sharing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it's important to bring more joy and peace into this planet. So
absolutely.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. One more down from a standpoint of looking behind the curtain and what it's really all about at the end of the day. We'll see you on the next episode. And that's a wrap on today's episode. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and got some valuable insights into the world of buying and selling businesses. Want to be a guest on our show? If you have a deal that you'd like to discuss with us or a business story to share, we'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email using the contact information below in the episode notes, and let's make this happen. Never miss an episode. Make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And if you found today's episode helpful, please leave us a review. It helps more people like you find the show.